It was later than I realized when he knocked. Not late in a dramatic way. Late in the quiet way. The kind of late where the streetlights feel louder than the houses. I remember checking my phone before I opened the door. I didn't need to. I already knew who it was. He stood a little farther back than usual, hands in his jacket pockets, like he didn't want to crowd the doorway. He said my name the way people do when they're not sure they should be there. Like he was giving me an easy out. I should have taken it. I asked if everything was okay. That's what you say when someone shows up unannounced, even when you already know the answer isn't simple. He said he was just checking in, that he saw my light on, that he figured I was still awake. All of that sounded reasonable. Too reasonable. I stepped aside without thinking. Not a big gesture, just enough room for him to pass. I didn't invite him in. I didn't tell him to leave either. I let the moment decide for me. The door closed behind him, and the house felt smaller. Not uncomfortable, just aware. We stood there for a second, neither of us moving. I could smell the cold on his jacket. I remember thinking how strange it was that I noticed that at all. I asked if he wanted some water. He said no, thank you. He always says thank you like that. Slow, deliberate. He looked around, like he was seeing the place for the first time. I suddenly felt exposed, even though nothing had changed. Same walls, same furniture, same me. I told him I'd had a long day. That was true. I didn't tell him why. I didn't need to. Something in my voice must have done the explaining for me, because he nodded like he understood more than I'd said. He sat down without asking, on the far end of the couch. Respectful distance. That made it worse. I stayed standing longer than necessary, pretending to straighten things that didn't need it. The room was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the sound of my own thoughts getting louder. I could feel him there without looking at him. The weight of another person in a space you thought belonged only to you. When I finally sat, I chose the chair instead. That felt safer. Temporary. Like I was still in control of the situation. We talked about nothing at first. Small things. Neighbors. Weather. Things people say when they're avoiding what they actually want to talk about. Every pause stretched just a second too long. Every silence felt intentional. At some point, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Not toward me, just closer. And I noticed my body react before my mind did. A shift, a tightening. Like something inside me was paying attention even when I told myself not to. He asked if I was okay. Really okay. I laughed and said yes too quickly. He didn't laugh back. That's when I knew this wasn't just a visit. I told him I didn't mean to worry him. He said I didn't, that he just noticed things, that he's always noticed things. The way he said it made it feel less like an observation and more like a confession. I should have changed the subject. I should have stood up. I should have created distance. Instead, I stayed exactly where I was and listened. He talked about his own night, about how quiet his place felt, about how sometimes silence makes you think too much. I nodded like I agreed, even though I was barely hearing the words anymore. I was focused on the space between us, on how it didn't feel as wide as it had before. He didn't touch me. Not even close. That was the problem. He shifted again, this time leaning back, like he was giving the room permission to breathe. I noticed how deliberate he was about every movement. Nothing rushed, nothing careless. It felt like he was aware of himself in my space in a way that made me more aware of myself, too. I told myself this was normal. Two adults talking, neighbors checking in. Nothing about it had crossed a line yet. That word, yet, sat quietly in my head, heavy and patient. He asked how long I'd been living there. I answered, but my voice sounded different to my own ears, softer, like I wasn't trying to be heard as much as understood. He nodded again, slow, eyes steady, like he was collecting details instead of making conversation. At one point, he smiled. Not wide, not playful, just enough to let me know he was comfortable. That should have made me comfortable too. Instead, it made me restless. I stood up to pour myself a glass of water I didn't really want. My hands felt warmer than usual around the glass. I could feel his eyes follow me. Not openly, not obviously, but I could feel the awareness. The same way you can feel someone looking at you even when they're trying not to. I asked if he was sure he didn't want anything. He said he was fine where he was. Where he was. As if the place itself mattered. When I sat back down, I chose the couch this time. Not next to him. Close enough to feel the heat from his body without touching. I told myself it was practical. The chair was uncomfortable. That was all. The conversation slowed again. Less words, more pauses. Each one felt charged, like something was waiting for one of us to say the wrong or right thing. He mentioned it was getting late. I agreed. Neither of us moved. There's a specific kind of moment when you realize time has stopped behaving normally. Minutes stretch, seconds disappear. I was in one of those moments, aware of everything and nothing at the same time. He looked at me then. Really looked at me. Not like a neighbor, not like a friend, like someone seeing a version of you that only shows up when you're tired enough to stop pretending. I crossed my legs, then uncrossed them, immediately annoyed with myself for noticing the movement at all. He noticed too. I know he did. His jaw tightened just slightly, like he was making a decision he hadn't expected to face. I said his name. I don't remember why. Maybe to ground myself. Maybe to remind us both who we were supposed to be in that moment. He answered immediately. That's when I realized how long he'd been waiting for me to say it. He didn't move closer. He didn't reach out. He just held my gaze longer than was polite, longer than was safe. The room felt smaller again, the air thicker, like it was holding its breath along with me. I told myself I could still end this. I could stand up, I could open the door, I could laugh it off and blame the hour. I didn't do any of those things. He finally broke eye contact, rubbing his hands together like he was cold, even though the room was warm. I don't want to make this weird, he said. His voice was low, careful. The kind of careful that means someone already knows they're close to the edge. I told him it wasn't weird. I said it too fast. Again. He nodded, but he didn't look convinced. He shifted closer on the couch. Not toward me exactly, just enough that the space between us changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It felt occupied. I could hear the clock in the kitchen ticking. I hadn't noticed it before. Every second felt louder than the last, like it was counting something down. He asked if I wanted him to go. That was the moment, the clean exit, the polite escape. I opened my mouth to say yes. I really did. Instead, I hesitated. Just a breath. Just enough time for honesty to slip in before I could stop it. You don't have to rush, I said. And even as the words left my mouth, I felt something inside me settle. like a decision had been made without a vote. He exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding that breath for a while. He didn't smile. He didn't thank me. He just stayed. We sat there like that, close but not touching, the quiet pressing in from all sides. I could feel the warmth of his arm near mine, the faint movement when he shifted his weight. Every small motion felt amplified, like the room was paying attention. I tried to focus on anything else, the pattern in the rug, the shadow of the lamp on the wall, the way the light caught the edge of his jaw when he turned his head. That one was a mistake. My eyes lingered too long. He noticed. "I don't want to misread this," he said softly. I swallowed. My throat felt tight. "Then don't," I replied. It wasn't an answer. It was a challenge dressed up as caution. He tilted his head slightly, studying me. There was no rush in his expression, no hunger on the surface, just restraint. That was worse than anything else he could have shown me. He leaned back again, giving me space, like he was proving a point, like he was saying, "I can stop if you want me to." I hated how much that mattered to me. I shifted closer this time. Not enough to touch, enough to remove the excuse. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The silence had turned thick, almost intimate on its own. I was acutely aware of my breathing, of how shallow it had become, of how still he was, like he didn't want to spook me. I told myself this was just tension, that it would pass, that we'd laugh about it later, maybe even pretend it never happened. But tension like that doesn't pass. It waits. He stood up first, slowly, like he didn't trust his body to move any faster without saying something it shouldn't. The sudden absence of his weight on the couch made the room feel unbalanced, like I'd leaned too far in one direction and forgotten how to straighten myself. "I should go," he said. This time, I believed him. I nodded and stood too, keeping a careful distance, as if space could undo what had already settled between us. We walked to the door together. Not side by side, just close enough to feel the shared gravity of the moment pulling us in the same direction. At the door, he hesitated. His hand rested on the handle, but he didn't turn it right away. He looked at me, searching my face for something I didn't want to name. I didn't give him permission. I didn't take it back either. "Thank you for letting me stay," he said. I told him he was welcome. That felt true, too true. When the door finally opened, the night rushed in, cool and sharp, breaking the spell just enough to make it survivable. He stepped out, then turned once more, like there was something unfinished he'd accepted would stay that way. "Good night," he said. I watched him walk away before I closed the door. I stood there longer than necessary, listening to the quiet settle back into place. The house felt bigger again, emptier, but not the same as before. I locked the door and leaned against it, heart still racing, mind replaying every second I hadn't stopped. Nothing had happened. That's what I would tell myself. That's what I would tell anyone who asked. But later, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I understood the truth I'd been avoiding all night. Some lines don't need to be crossed to disappear.